Chapter 1. The Ordinary Yes. Mark Jacobs didn't realize he was going to propose until halfway through unloading the dishwasher. There was nothing symbolic about the moment. No swelling music. No mental montage of past dates or shared milestones. He was standing barefoot on the kitchen tile, one sock abandoned somewhere near the couch, holding a mug that didn't quite fit on the second shelf unless he angled it just right. Jackie was on the other side of the counter, scrolling through her phone with the distracted precision of someone half working even after work was technically over. Her glasses were perched on top of her head, not forgotten, just temporarily displaced, and she was chewing on the end of a pen without realizing it. "I think," she said vaguely, not looking up, "that if we push the deadline to Q3, the client will pretend they're fine with it, but then panic 1 week before delivery." Mark slid the mug into place and closed the cabinet. "That sounds like a them problem disguised as a you problem." She smiled at that, still didn't look up. "Exactly." He leaned back against the counter and watched her for a second longer than necessary. 3 years ago, he would have filled that silence with something performative. A joke, a kiss, a comment designed to keep momentum going. Now he let it sit. It occurred to him then, with startling simplicity, that every version of his future automatically included this moment. Not this exact kitchen or the half-loaded dishwasher, but the rhythm of it, the unremarkable companionship, the quiet competence, the fact that her presence didn't feel like something he had to maintain. The realization was so steady it almost startled him. "Jack," he said. She hummed in acknowledgement. "Do you ever picture yourself old?" She finally looked up. One eyebrow lifted. "That depends. Are we talking dignified old or aggressively opinionated old? Both feel inevitable." She capped the pen and set her phone down. "Why?" Mark rubbed the back of his neck, thoughtful rather than nervous. "I was just thinking. Every time I do, you're there. Not in a dramatic way. You're just there. And if you weren't, it wouldn't work." Jackie studied him now, measuring. She'd learned over time that Mark didn't waste words when he was serious. "Are you saying this is sweet?" she asked carefully. "Or are you about to reorganize our investment accounts again?" "Sweet," he said. "I think." She smiled, slow and warm. "Okay, continue." He took a breath. "I don't believe in fate, or soulmates, or fireworks that magically fix logistical compatibility. But I do believe in choosing someone on purpose, every day. And I realized I've been doing that with you without questioning it for a long time." Her expression softened, but she didn't interrupt. "I don't want a life where we end up strangers who once meant well," he went on. "I want the rocking chairs, the boring parts, the arguments we solve instead of win. I trust you." Jackie's throat worked. "Mark." He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out the small ring box he'd bought 2 weeks earlier and hidden behind the tax documents, of all places. Practical camouflage. He didn't kneel. He simply turned the box so she could see. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Not because it's the next step. Because it's the right one." Jackie stared at the ring for exactly 1 second before looking back at him. "Yes," she said, without hesitation, without qualifiers, without the flicker of doubt he'd seen in past relationships when permanence was introduced. She crossed the small space between them and pressed her forehead to his chest. "Yes, obviously." He exhaled, laughter bubbling out of him. "Okay, good. That was it. No pictures, no announcements. Just the beginning of something they both refused to treat casually." 3 months later, Mark's life was still recognizably his, just denser. Work had intensified as engagement questions began politely circling them like cautious birds. Venues, dates, colors. Jackie refused Pinterest. Mark refused cake tastings before lunch. They compromised on timeline instead. "A year," Jackie had said, decisive. "We're not sprinting into this." "I like a woman who respects calendar reality," Mark replied. Their relationship hadn't become perfect because of the ring. If anything, it became more precise. They disagreed without escalation. They discussed instead of fought. And when they couldn't land on the same conclusion, they identified whether the disagreement touched any of the pillars. Trust, loyalty, commitment. If it didn't, they set it down. Mark had never once doubted Jackie's fidelity. Not because he believed in blind trust, but because her actions consistently matched her boundaries. She was transparent without being performative. Loyal without being territorial. Committed without being confined. That confidence was why, on the Monday night 7 months into a grueling product cycle, he texted her without hesitation. "Running late. Team's still grinding. Don't wait for me." "I'm sorry." Her reply came a minute later. "Don't be. Crush it. I'll find food." By 8:30, the conference room looked like a battlefield of sticky notes and empty coffee cups. Mark cut the team loose with sincere thanks, already mentally rehearsing the board presentation. Diane Brinks lingered. "I can stay," she said, "but I'm also starving." "Invite your husband and kids," Mark suggested without missing a beat. "Pizza. We'll finish the last details without hallucinating spreadsheets." She laughed. "Deal." It was efficient, professional, grounded. And when Mark walked into his apartment after 10, Jackie didn't interrogate him. She just asked if he wanted leftovers. That normalcy felt like proof. Mark had no way of knowing that 3 weeks later, the scent of unfamiliar cologne would dismantle something he thought was airtight. Not because the rules were unclear, but because someone decided they were flexible. And flexibility, he would soon learn, meant different things depending on who was bending. Chapter 2, Pizza, Metrics, and Families. The conference room clock ticked louder the later it got, as if offended that no one respected its authority after business hours. Mark stood at the whiteboard with a marker uncapped, listening as Diane Brinks walked through the final risk assessment. Her tone was calm, precise, and completely unsentimental, one of the reasons she had been his co-lead on the project. Diane didn't catastrophize. She didn't hedge. She named problems and solved them. And if procurement drags their feet again, she concluded, tapping the table with her knuckle, we reroute through the secondary supplier and absorb the cost. Keeps the delivery date clean. Mark nodded. That'll irritate finance, but not as much as missing the board timeline. Exactly. Around them, the rest of the team sat slumped in various stages of burnout. Someone had ordered coffee an hour ago that tasted like regret. The air was stale with concentration and overused HVAC. Mark capped the marker. Okay, that's enough. Everyone go home before we start hallucinating charts that don't exist. There was a collective exhale, followed by the scrape of chairs and muted thanks. Laptops snapped shut. Shoulder bags were slung with the urgency of people escaping a mild disaster. Diane didn't move right away. I can stay, she said, glancing at the board. We're 98% there. Mark checked his watch. Just past 8. So can I, he said. But not on fumes. She snorted. Agreed. I could eat drywall at this point. Invite David and the kids, he said without hesitation. Pizza place. We'll finish the last 2% without pretending this is a date. Diane laughed outright. You're good. I'll text him. They were at a family-friendly pizza place 10 minutes later. The kind with uneven tables and laminated menus that promised authenticity through stubborn design choices. The noise level was constant. Kids laughing, parents negotiating breadsticks, someone's phone ringing unanswered. Diane's husband, David, waved when Mark walked in. He was tall in a nondescript way, wire-rim glasses, the relaxed posture of someone who didn't need to prove competency because his life already did it for him. Mark, he said warmly, standing to shake his hand. Finally get to meet the man who steals my wife. For spreadsheets only, Mark said. I swear. David grinned. That's how it starts. The kids, 2 girls, 8 and 10 by Mark's guess, were mid-argument over whether pineapple on pizza was illegal or merely suspicious. Diane slid seamlessly from executive to referee as menus arrived, her voice changing pitch without losing authority. They ate. They worked. Mark and Diane sat across from each other, laptops open, napkins doubling as scratch paper. They crossed off bullet points. They debated phrasing. At one point, Diane reached over and rotated Mark's screen toward herself. This slide, she said, buries the lead. You say that like it's a crime. It is. There are victims. David leaned over, peering. Which one is the lead? Mark gestured vaguely. The thing the board pretends to understand. David nodded solemnly. Ah, corporate. The kids drifted in and out of the conversation, occasionally asking if they could have dessert or accusing one another of hoarding sausage slices. Diane responded with half her attention, automatically, like someone who loved deeply and multitasked efficiently. Mark noticed the way she lit up when one of the girls leaned against her arm. Not performative, not resentful, just present. They wrapped up just before 9:30. Diane closed her laptop with satisfaction. Done. We're good. We're more than good, Mark said. This is clean. David raised his glass. To clean. Mark lifted his in return. To people who remember to go home. When Mark finally walked into his apartment a little after 10, Jackie was curled up on the couch with the cat and a half-watched cooking show playing softly. You hungry? She asked without looking up. I ate, he said, toeing off his shoes. Dinner with Diane while we finished. That makes sense, Jackie replied easily. Want ice cream anyway? He smiled. Always. There were no follow-up questions. No pauses. Just the quiet confidence of trust that didn't need ceremony. The next morning unfolded like choreography they'd practiced for months. Mark stood in front of the boardroom screen, remote in hand, presentation advancing exactly as planned. The questions were sharp. The interruptions precise. He answered without rushing, leaning into the collaborative language Diane had refined the night before. 30 minutes later, the proposal was adopted unanimously. After the team filed out, still buzzing, the district manager, 2 levels above Mark's usual orbit, lingered. Exceptional work, she said. All of you. Then she smiled in a way that suggested something had been coordinated without his knowledge. We've authorized an efficiency bonus for the project, she continued. 10,000 each. You'll see it with the next payroll cycle. There was a brief, stunned silence before cheers broke out. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Someone cursed joyfully. Mark grinned, adrenaline still buzzing. He caught Diane's eye and gave her a small nod. That night, when he told Jackie about the approval, he didn't mention the bonus. Not because he was hiding anything. It simply didn't feel real yet. Numbers without confirmation didn't count in Mark's mental ledger. The following weeks passed quietly, comfortably. Late nights happened on both sides. Dinner schedules shifted. They compared calendars over coffee and argued briefly about whether September weddings were optimistic or delusional. On a Tuesday evening like any other, Jackie texted him around 5. Running late. Client spiraled. I'll grab dinner. Don't wait. Mark didn't hesitate. Got it. Good luck. He spent the evening answering emails, half watching a documentary, and folding laundry in a way Jackie claimed was technically correct but emotionally aggressive. At a little past 10, the door opened. Jackie walked in smiling. Hey, she said lightly, dropping her bag. Mark looked up from the recliner and smelled it. The cologne wasn't overpowering. It wasn't cheap. It lingered just enough to be unmistakably unfamiliar. Jackie leaned in to kiss him. He pulled back. Her smile faltered. What? Where were you? He asked calmly. She shrugged. I told you. We worked late. Then went to dinner. Who went to dinner? He asked. She hesitated briefly. One of the guys from work. He nodded once. What were you working on? Stuff, she said. Client prep. You know. He waited. And? He prompted gently. She shifted. We mostly just talked. Mark stood, crossed to the living room, and sat in the recliner. Jackie followed, still talking, explaining her day in broad strokes that didn't land anywhere. When she finished, he looked at her evenly. So, he said, you went on a date with another man. Her head snapped up. What? No. I told you. A dinner, he said, voice steady. With no work. Nothing measurable. That sounds like a date. Her arms crossed. You did the same thing. The words landed heavier than she intended. Mark studied her, searching not for guilt but for understanding. You genuinely believe that, he said. She bristled. His words exactly. His. Mark repeated. She caught herself too late. You talked about us, he said quietly. With him. She stood. You're making too much of this. Mark rose more slowly. I'm not breaking up with you, he said, calm as ever. But the engagement is on hold. Her eyes widened. I don't recognize you right now, he continued. And I'm not marrying someone who treats loyalty like a scoreboard. Silence stretched between them, not explosive, not dramatic. Just heavy with redefinition. This wasn't an ending. But it was the end of assumptions they both thought were settled. Chapter 3. After the hold, the apartment had never felt so acoustically efficient. Mark became aware of it as soon as the words engagement on hold settled into the air like dust that refused to choose a surface. Every sound seemed amplified by their absence. The refrigerator's low hum, the faint tick of the wall clock, the distant impersonality of traffic outside. Jackie was still standing near the couch, arms crossed, the defensive posture now held too long to be useful. So, she said finally, voice tight, what does that even mean? It means, Mark replied evenly, that we stopped pretending this didn't just reveal something important. She let out a sharp breath. I didn't cheat on you. I didn't say you did. You're acting like I did. I'm reacting to what you did, he corrected. Those are different things. Jackie shook her head and began pacing, hands running through her hair. This is ridiculous. You went to dinner with Diane. And I told you exactly how, why, and with whom, he said calmly. Before you ever had to wonder. That shouldn't matter. It matters because I didn't outsource our relationship to my coworker, Mark replied. His voice remained level, which only seemed to frustrate her more. You didn't just eat dinner. You sought validation. She stopped pacing. That's not fair. Then tell me what it was. Silence. Not evasive silence. Not defiant silence. Something closer to stalled processing. Jackie opened her mouth, closed it, then sat down hard on the couch. The fight leaked out of her shoulders in a way Mark hadn't seen before. He said, she began slowly, that if I was really okay with you going out to dinner with another woman, I wouldn't feel weird about it. Mark's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And did you? He asked. She hesitated. I didn't think I did. Not until he said that. So you tested it, Mark said. She didn't dispute it. What did you want to prove? He asked quietly. That I was... She stopped, grimaced. That I wasn't the cool fiancé who pretends nothing bothers her. Mark nodded once, understanding threading its way through the disappointment. And when it did bother you, he said, you didn't come to me. You were busy. That's an explanation, he said gently. Not a justification. Jackie pressed her palms into her thighs. I didn't intend to hurt you. I know, Mark said. Intent doesn't absolve impact. That landed. She looked up at him then, eyes glossy. Not guilty, but shaken. I didn't think it would feel like this. Neither did I. They sat in silence for several beats, the unspoken logistics creeping in around the emotional wreckage. Are you sleeping on the couch? She asked, half joking, half afraid. Mark shook his head. No, I don't think physical distance solves conceptual problems. So we're normal? She asked. No, he said immediately, then softened it. But we're not unstable. She blinked at that. The engagement is paused, he continued. Not the relationship, not the partnership. But I need clarity before permanence. Jackie let out a brittle laugh. You're very composed for someone whose fiancé smells like another man. Don't confuse calm with indifference, he said quietly. That stripped the humor right out of it. Jackie nodded. Okay. The word was small. Earnest. Okay, Mark echoed. They moved through the rest of the night with awkward civility, coexisting rather than connecting. Jackie showered longer than usual. Mark loaded the dishwasher again, more forcefully than necessary, then immediately re-sorted the silverware because disorder bothered him more now than rage ever did. In bed, they lay facing opposite directions, not out of spite but restraint. No one reached. No one demanded reassurance they hadn't earned yet. Mark slept lightly. Jackie didn't sleep at all. Morning arrived without resolution. Jackie was already dressed when Mark emerged from the bedroom, hair neatly styled, makeup understated but deliberate, professional armor. He poured coffee for both of them by habit, handed her a mug without comment. Thank you, she said quietly. They stood side by side at the counter, drinking in silence. I'm calling a meeting, Jackie said. With him? Mark asked. With myself, she replied. And probably HR. Mark studied her profile. That's a logistical response. It's also accountability, she said. I don't want that dynamic in my work life. He nodded. Good. She glanced at him. That's it. I'm not your supervisor, he said. I'm evaluating whether you're my partner. She winced but accepted it. Fair. Before she left, she hesitated by the door. I meant what I said last night. I didn't plan to stray. I know, Mark said. But you planned to retaliate. Her mouth tightened. I thought it would even things. That's what worries me, he replied. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt emptier. Not lonelier, exactly, but suspended. Mark called in late to work and sat alone with his thoughts for the first time since the confrontation. He didn't spiral. He didn't catastrophize. He outlined the situation like a project, not to sterilize the feelings but to respect them. Inputs, actions, outcomes. Jackie had violated a boundary not because she misunderstood it, but because she'd assumed a temporary exception. That assumption needed addressing. By the time Jackie returned that evening, Mark had drafted something. Not an ultimatum, not a threat. A framework. She spotted the legal pad immediately. Oh God, she said. Is this a list? Yes, he said. But not that kind. She dropped her bag and came closer. Okay. What kind? A reality check kind. She sat opposite him at the table. Rule 1, Mark said plainly. There are no passes. Ever. Jackie nodded immediately. Agreed. Rule 2, he continued. Emotional validation belongs inside the relationship first. If it goes outside before it comes to me, that's a breach. She swallowed. Understood. Rule 3, he said, holding her gaze. Retaliation is disqualifying. She flinched. I didn't realize I was doing that. You were, he said gently. Awareness comes after damage sometimes. Jackie sighed. And penalties? He hesitated. We don't talk about consequences like a game. But trust doesn't regenerate on hope alone. She nodded slowly. So a verification? Yes, he said. Occasional. Mutual. Transparent. Not surveillance. Jackie leaned back, processing, then laughed weakly. It's incredibly unromantic how good you are at this. Mark allowed a small smile. I fell in love through spreadsheets. Romance survived. Her laughter faded into something calmer. I want the chairs, she said suddenly. I don't want to win arguments at 60. He studied her. Then don't practice winning now. There was no kiss that night. No dramatic reconciliation. But they sat at the table long after the coffee went cold, rebuilding something sturdier than apology. Not because it was broken beyond repair, but because settling back into old assumptions would have been easier than growth. And easier had never been the goal. Chapter 4, Definitions and Consequences. If the first night after the engagement was put on hold had been quiet, the days that followed were methodical. Mark didn't withdraw. That would have been easier, cleaner, and deeply misleading. Instead, he stayed present in the way only someone deeply invested could. Observant, thoughtful, unflinching. Jackie noticed it immediately. He still texted when meetings ran late. Still asked about her day. Still made dinner on the nights she came home exhausted and stared into the refrigerator like it might offer solutions. But he no longer filled in gaps for her. He waited. It was unsettling. On Thursday evening, 3 days after everything shifted, Jackie came home with a paper folder tucked under her arm and a look on her face that suggested she'd spent the day doing something uncomfortable but necessary. HR? Mark asked mildly as she set her bag down. Yes, she said, exhaling. Also myself. Both were unpleasant. Good, he replied, not unkindly. She arched an eyebrow. You're enjoying this far too much. No, he said. I'm relieved you're taking it seriously. That softened her just a fraction. She peeled off her shoes and padded into the kitchen, perching against the counter as Mark chopped vegetables. I reassigned myself off his projects, she said, and documented the conversation. Not accusatory, just clean. Smart. And, she added after a beat, I told him not to contact me outside work channels again. Mark glanced at her. How did that go? He tried to joke it away, she said flatly. Called me dramatic. Mark's jaw set. That tells you everything you need to know. Yes, she agreed quietly. It really does. They cooked together, falling back into familiar choreography. She measured, he sautéed, but something new threaded through it. Less assumption, more intention. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Jackie curled up on the couch, knees tucked beneath her, while Mark settled into the armchair across from her instead of beside her. The physical distance was subtle but meaningful. She noticed. Are you still mad? She asked. I'm still processing, Mark corrected. Those are different stages. She huffed a quiet laugh. You're going to turn this into some kind of flowchart, aren't you? He smiled faintly. Already did. She groaned. Of course you did. But the humor didn't quite stick. Jackie shifted, serious now. Talk to me. Not like a risk assessment. Like me. Mark set his wine glass down and leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. Okay, he said. Here's the thing you're not allowed to minimize. She still. I'm listening. This wasn't about jealousy, he continued. I don't need exclusivity from fear. I need it from choice. And what shook me wasn't the dinner. It was the logic. She nodded slowly. You framed it as fairness, he said. Like fidelity operates on balance sheets. I did X, so you were entitled to Y. Jackie grimaced. When you say it like that, it sounds transactional, Mark finished. Exactly. She hugged a pillow to her chest. I didn't realize how fast it spiraled in my head. That's another issue, he said gently. You let someone else narrate our relationship to you. Her eyes flicked up. I know. Jack, he continued softer now. You didn't come to me when you felt unsettled. You outsourced reassurance to a man who benefits from destabilizing us. She swallowed hard. I see that now. I need to know, he said. What would have happened if I hadn't smelled the cologne? The question wasn't accusatory. It was surgical. Jackie stared at the coffee table for a long moment. I don't know, she admitted. And that scares me. It scares me too, Mark said. Silence stretched, not antagonistic but heavy with reckoning. After a moment, Jackie straightened. We need clearer boundaries, she said. Not assumed ones. Yes, Mark agreed. And consequences that aren't emotional guesses. She winced. You really don't like ambiguity. I don't like hidden rules, he said. Especially in something this important. Jackie nodded, determination lining her spine. Okay, let's define it. They moved to the dining table. Mark brought out the legal pad again, uncapped a pen, and waited. Jackie drew a breath. Boundary 1. No one-on-one social dinners with coworkers of compatible orientation. Mark raised an eyebrow slightly. Define social. She smirked despite herself. See? This is why I love you. Answer the question. No pretense of work, she said. No catch-up dinners. If work is done, we go home. Agreed, Mark said, writing it down. Exception, she considered. Group settings, family present, or transparent notice beforehand. Good. Boundary 2, she continued, voice steadier. Emotional conversations about our relationship stay between us or a neutral third party we both agree on. Mark nodded. Therapists, trusted friends, never potential alternatives. Yes, he wrote. She hesitated before the third one. Boundary 3, intent matters, but impact governs response. Mark stilled, then smiled, genuine this time. That's well said. She shrugged. I've had practice this week. He jotted it down. Okay, now penalties. Jackie looked genuinely nervous. I don't like the word. Neither do I, Mark said. But pretending there aren't consequences makes trust fictional. She folded her hands. If one of us crosses a defined boundary, we pause forward momentum. Meaning, weddings, big financial entanglements, major life steps, she clarified. Until it's resolved. Mark considered. That's proportional. And, she added quietly, repeat violations end things. He met her gaze squarely. Without debate. Yes. They sat back, the list completed, not exhaustive but real. Jackie reached across the table and rested her hand near his, not touching. Waiting. So, she said tentatively, half smiling. Did I pass the audit? Mark didn't answer right away. This isn't about passing, he said finally. It's about alignment. She nodded. And, he continued, I'm still here, which should tell you something. Her eyes softened. It tells me everything. For the first time since that night, Mark stood and held out his hand. Jackie took it. They didn't kiss. Instead, she leaned into him, forehead resting against his chest like she had on the night he proposed. I don't want to compete with you, she said quietly. I want to choose you. Then keep choosing, Mark replied. Even when it's uncomfortable. She smiled against him, a little sad, a little determined. Fair warning. Growth is not my cutest look. He chuckled. Neither is mine. But it's less destructive. They stayed there for a moment. Two people not returning to what was comfortable, but building toward something clearer. The engagement was still on hold. But for the first time since it happened, it no longer felt like a withdrawal. It felt like an investment. One that demanded effort, honesty, and the humility to admit that love didn't fail because of mistakes. It failed only when people refused to define what mattered. And they were done doing that. Chapter 5, Verification Isn't Surveillance. The therapist's office smelled faintly of citrus and furniture polish. A combination that suggested intentional calm rather than actual serenity. Mark noticed it immediately and filed it away as evidence that the room had been designed by someone who believed environment could preempt conflict. He respected the effort. Jackie sat beside him on the small couch, posture upright, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a performance review to begin. Mark sat slightly angled toward her, attentive without crowding. They hadn't rehearsed this, which felt important. Dr. Elena Morales smiled at them from her chair, tablet balanced on her knee. She was in her early 40s, wearing a blazer that split the difference between authority and approachability. So, she said gently, who'd like to start? Jackie inhaled, then gestured toward Mark. He put the engagement on hold. Dr. Morales nodded. And how do you feel about that? Jackie's answer came quickly. Like I deserved it. Mark blinked, surprised. Dr. Morales raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Jackie grimaced. I've had a week. Dr. Morales turned to Mark. And you? I don't enjoy punishment, Mark said. But I don't believe in pretending something fundamental didn't just surface. Dr. Morales smiled slightly. Good. Then we're not here to fix something broken. We're here to define something unclear. That framing settled over them both. Tell me about trust, the therapist continued. What it means to you individually. Mark spoke first. Trust is consistency between stated intent and observable behavior. Jackie shot him a look. That sounded rehearsed. It wasn't, he said mildly. I just think in sentences. Dr. Morales smiled. And you, Jackie? Jackie hesitated. Trust is knowing someone won't intentionally harm you, even when they mess up. Mark nodded. Those aren't incompatible. No, Dr. Morales agreed. They're complementary. One is structural. One is emotional. She tapped her tablet lightly. The rupture here wasn't infidelity. It was misalignment in how you both define acceptable proximity to external validation. Jackie winced. That sounds accurate and unflattering. Mark exhaled through a small smile. Welcome to therapy. Dr. Morales leaned forward slightly. Jackie, what need were you meeting by going to dinner? Jackie's face flushed. I wanted to feel chosen, not assumed. Mark's chest tightened, not defensively, but with recognition. And Mark, Dr. Morales turned to him. What boundary did that cross for you? That emotional intimacy shouldn't be triangulated, he replied. Especially not without transparency. Dr. Morales nodded slowly. Excellent. Now verification. Jackie groaned. I knew this would come up. Mark glanced at her. You didn't seem opposed at the table. I wasn't opposed, she clarified. I was intimidated. Dr. Morales smiled. Verification often gets confused with control. The difference is consent and proportionality. She looked between them. What would verification look like for you without eroding autonomy? Mark thought for a moment. Shared calendars for work events involving one-on-one time. Advance notice of after-hours social interactions. Jackie nodded. And openness about emotional shifts. If something bothers me, I say it to him first. Dr. Morales scribbled something. And how will you ensure this doesn't become monitoring? Mark answered immediately. By making it reciprocal and finite. No audits unless there's cause. Jackie tilted her head. See, that's the part that scares me. Unless there's cause. Dr. Morales leaned in. What scares you about that? That one mistake becomes a permanent suspicion, Jackie said quietly. Mark turned toward her fully. That's not what I want. But you can't promise that, she said. You can't unknow something. He considered the truth of that. No, he admitted. But I can promise to evaluate patterns, not moments. Dr. Morales smiled. That's a crucial distinction. The session moved through logistics and language, moments of humor breaking the tension. Jackie laughed when Dr. Morales referred to their boundaries as relationship bylaws. Mark deadpanned that bylaws were enforceable, which only made Jackie laugh harder. When the hour ended, they stepped back into the afternoon sun feeling oddly lighter. Not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was being avoided. That night, they cooked together again, the normalcy no longer borrowed but rebuilt. So, Jackie said, stirring a pot thoughtfully, are we verified now? Mark smiled. Pending. She rolled her eyes. You're terrible. You love it. I tolerate it, she corrected. They settled onto the couch after dinner, closer this time. Not touching yet, still deliberate but aligned. I ran into him today, Jackie said suddenly. Mark stiffened slightly. And he apologized, she said. Sort of. Mostly because HR shut him down. That tracks. He said I overreacted. Mark scoffed before he could stop himself. Jackie glanced at him. What? That's a man who confuses access with entitlement, he said. She nodded slowly. I didn't defend myself. I just repeated the boundary. How did that feel? Empowering, she admitted. And embarrassing. Growth often is, Mark said softly. It exposes what we didn't know about ourselves. She leaned her head against his shoulder, tentative. He allowed it, heart steady. I don't want to lose what we have, she murmured. We haven't, he replied. We've refined it. She smiled faintly. You're still not wearing the ring. Mark glanced at his bare hand. Not yet. That hurts, she said honestly. I know, he replied. But rushing past discomfort creates debt. She sighed. You really believe that? I do. She sat up and turned to face him fully. Then tell me what you need. Not eventually. Now. Mark met her gaze. I need to see us practice what we defined. Over time. With ease, not vigilance. And then we revisit the engagement, he said. Not by default. By choice. Jackie swallowed. Then nodded. Okay. She hesitated, then reached for his hand. This time he intertwined their fingers without pause. Thank you for not turning this into a power struggle, she said. Thank you for not minimizing it, he replied. They sat like that for a while, the quiet no longer strained but thoughtful. Verification wasn't surveillance. It wasn't accusation. It was accountability with consent. And for the first time since certainty cracked, both of them felt something return. Not blind trust, not naive ease, but something stronger. Confidence. Built slowly. Together. Chapter 6. The wrong kind of attention. If growth had a sound, Jackie decided, it would be the faint hum of discomfort that followed her everywhere now. Not loud enough to panic over. Not sharp enough to flee from. Just persistent, like an air conditioner that never quite reached the desired temperature, reminding you that comfort required adjustment. She felt it at work most of all. The reassignment had been clean, efficient. HR had nodded, documented, and moved forward exactly as organizations like to pretend they always did. Her calendar now contained fewer overlapping meetings, fewer ambiguous lunches, fewer invitations framed as quick check-ins that had never really been about work. And yet, attention, once invited, didn't disappear politely. Jackie noticed it in the way people lingered too long by her desk now that she had drawn a line. In the way casual compliments sharpened when she declined after-hours drinks. In the subtle recalibration of some men who seemed less interested in her ideas once the possibility of access had been clearly revoked. It was unsettling, not because she missed it, but because she realized how long she'd mistaken background noise for neutrality. Mark noticed the difference too. You're quieter, he said one evening as they sorted groceries onto the counter, moving side by side in practiced efficiency. I'm thinking, she replied. Then, after a beat, about how much of my confidence I outsourced without noticing. He paused, holding a carton of eggs. That's not nothing. No, she agreed. It's worse. It was comfortable. He set the eggs down carefully. Comfort can be deceptive that way. She looked at him, really looked. He hadn't changed his behavior, hadn't become colder or harsher since the hold. But there was a steadiness to him now that felt earned rather than assumed. I keep replaying that night, she admitted. Not because I want it undone, but because I want to understand how I justified it so quickly. Mark considered. Did you feel unseen? She frowned. Not by you, but by the situation, he prompted. Yes, she said slowly. You were deep in the most important project of your career. I was supporting. That doesn't diminish you. I know, she said, but I think I wanted to be noticed as exceptional by someone who didn't already see me that way. Mark absorbed that without flinching. That's honest. She winced. Is it forgivable? That depends, he replied gently, on whether it becomes a pattern or a lesson. Jackie nodded. I want it to be a lesson, not a resume. That earned a quiet laugh from him. The lesson became more concrete sooner than either of them expected. Mark was at the gym when his phone buzzed with Jackie's name. He almost ignored it. She knew his schedule, but the second vibration told him it mattered. Hey, he said, stepping outside. What's up? There's something I need to tell you, she said, voice steady but strained. His posture straightened. I'm listening. He emailed me, she continued, from a personal account. Nothing overt, just nostalgic, suggestive. Mark's jaw tightened. What did you do? I didn't reply, she said immediately. I forwarded it to HR and then, I froze. You're calling now, he said calmly. Yes. Good. There was a pause on the line. Are you angry? Mark exhaled slowly. At him? Yes. At you? No. Her shoulders sagged on the other end. I hate that this even exists. So do I, he said. But the difference is how you're handling it. And how am I handling it? She asked softly. By bringing it to me, he replied. That's the boundary working. She swallowed hard. I don't like how exposed this makes me feel. I know, he said. Accountability feels like vulnerability because it removes plausible deniability. She laughed weakly. You really don't let yourself off easy, do you? He smiled, unseen. I don't let us off easy. There's a difference. That night, Jackie laid the printed email on the table between them without commentary. Mark read it once, then again. He was probing, he said, looking for the door to crack. It didn't, she replied. No, he agreed. It didn't. They didn't dramatize it. They didn't spiral. They followed the process they'd defined: documentation, transparency, resolution. What surprised Jackie most wasn't Mark's calm. It was her own. The discomfort shifted directions a week later. Mark sat across from Diane at lunch, both of them momentarily free after a morning of back-to-back meetings. Their tables were separate, their laptops closed. They were talking about schools, her daughters, the competitive nonsense of district lines, when Mark felt it. The flicker. Not attraction. Not desire. Comparison. He imagined, unbidden, what ease would look like with someone who shared his professional rhythms without friction. Someone whose life was already compartmentalized, whose boundaries were externally enforced by family structure. The thought passed as soon as it arrived, but it left a residue that unsettled him more than Jackie's mistake ever had. That evening, he told her. Not dramatically, not apologetically, just factually. I had a moment today, he said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. It didn't go anywhere, but it existed. Jackie stilled. Her chest tightened reflexively. Then she caught herself and breathed through it. Tell me about it, she said. I compared, he admitted, which is usually the first crack in long-term thinking. She nodded slowly. And you're telling me because? Because secrecy is fertilizer for rationalization, he said. And I promised transparency. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached for his hand. Thank you, she said. That couldn't have been comfortable. It wasn't, he agreed. But it reminded me something important. What? She asked. That loyalty isn't the absence of alternative narratives, he said. It's the refusal to entertain them. Her eyes softened. That helps. They sat in that mutual honesty, neither relieved nor burdened by it, just aligned. Later that night, curled together on the couch for the first time in weeks, Jackie laughed quietly. What? Mark asked. I just realized, she said, warm amusement in her voice, that we're doing relationship maintenance at a level most people reserve for finance audits. Mark smiled into her hair. We're investing long-term. She tilted her head to look at him. Do you still want the chairs? He met her gaze without hesitation. Yes. She exhaled, tension easing. Good. Because I'm done auditioning for validation I don't need. The engagement was still on hold. But something else, something quieter and far more resilient, was taking shape in its place. Not certainty. Competence. Trust that wasn't blind. Loyalty that wasn't performative. Commitment that didn't rely on momentum. And for both of them, that felt far more enduring than any ring ever could. Chapter 7. Choosing the chairs. The near break didn't come with shouting. That surprised both of them later. It arrived quietly on a Sunday afternoon that should have been forgettable. Coffee gone lukewarm in matching mugs, laundry tumbling in the background, the cat asleep in a patch of sun like it had never known doubt. They were sitting at opposite ends of the couch, not estranged so much as contemplative, when Jackie said, I think I need to ask you something uncomfortable. Mark didn't look up from the folded towel in his hands. That tracks with our current trajectory. She smiled faintly, then sobered. Do you still see me the same way? The question caught him, not because he hadn't considered it, but because it demanded an answer heavier than reassurance. He set the towel down and turned fully toward her. No, he said honestly. Jackie nodded slowly, absorbing it. Okay. I see you more clearly, he continued. That's not worse, but it's different. She hugged her knees to her chest. Is that difference something you're willing to live with? Or is it something you'll resent later? That was the real question. The one beneath every hard conversation they'd been having since the hold. Mark didn't answer immediately. I don't resent growth, he said finally. I resent denial. Jackie's brow furrowed. I'm not denying anything. I know, he said, but I'm thinking forward. To years where this moment becomes a shorthand for doubt. I need to know whether we're building confidence or just tolerating damage. Her throat tightened. And what do you think we're doing? I don't know yet, he admitted. That's what scares me. For the first time since this all began, Jackie felt her composure crack. Not into defensiveness, but fear. What if this becomes the thing you bring up every time we disagree? She asked quietly. What if I spend the rest of my life proving I'm not that version of myself? Mark considered that carefully. Then I would be doing something wrong. She searched his face. Can you promise that won't happen? No, he said. But I can promise I won't weaponize it. That's not the same, she said, voice trembling. No, he agreed. It's more honest. Silence pressed in, not hostile, but heavy with the weight of futures being evaluated. Jackie stood abruptly and crossed to the window, arms wrapped around herself. I don't want to spend our marriage managing your trust, and I don't want to spend it managing my fear of betrayal, Mark replied. His voice softened. We're circling the same problem from different sides. She turned back to him. So what do we do? Mark stood too, the space between them taut. We decide, he said, whether this chapter defines us or teaches us. Jackie laughed shakily. You make it sound so simple. It isn't, he said. But it is binary. She paced once, then stopped in front of him. If we walk away now, I don't get to learn from this. I just get to regret it. He nodded. And if we stay together without choosing each other deliberately, we rewrite this every year in smaller, meaner ways. Her eyes shone. I don't want that. Neither do I. She took a breath so deep it shook her. Then I need to know you're not staying out of obligation, or momentum, or because you're afraid of starting over at 34. Mark smiled sadly. I'm perfectly capable of starting over. That's why this matters. She swallowed. Then why are you still here? He stepped closer, stopping just inside her personal space. Because even now, especially now, I still want the chairs. With you. Her eyes filled. Even if they come with harder conversations? Yes, he said without hesitation. Because the alternative is quieter loneliness. And I won't choose that. Jackie let out a shaky laugh that collapsed into tears. God, I hate how much sense that makes. He reached out, tentative but hopeful, and she closed the distance the rest of the way, pressing her forehead to his chest. I don't want to be your rival, she said, voice muffled. I want to be your teammate. Mark held her fully now, arms solid and sure. Then we stop scoring points. She nodded against him. And if I slip? Then we talk, he said. Immediately. Not later. Not with anyone else first. She pulled back just enough to look at him. And if you start holding this over me? Then you call me on it, he said. And I listen. Her mouth curved into a watery smile. We're really doing this, aren't we? The unglamorous, painstaking version. Mark chuckled softly. The one that actually lasts. They stayed there for a while, holding on not because they needed reassurance, but because connection was a choice they were actively making. That night, as they prepared for bed, Jackie paused at the nightstand and picked up the ring box. She turned it over in her hands, not opening it, just acknowledging its weight. Not yet, she said gently, as if reading his mind. Mark nodded. Not yet. She set it back down, and instead slid a small note across the nightstand toward him. What's this? He asked. Terms, she said lightly. Revised. He smiled deeply this time. Of course it is. They climbed into bed and faced each other. No space between them now. No urgency either. Tomorrow wouldn't erase the near break, but it would build on what survived it. And that mattered more than certainty ever could. Chapter 8. Re-engagement. Revised terms. The ring went back on a Tuesday. That felt important to Mark, not because there was anything mystical about the day, but because it wasn't engineered for symbolism. It wasn't an anniversary. It wasn't a holiday. It was an ordinary slice of life that had earned the right to matter. Jackie didn't notice immediately. They were standing in the kitchen, angled toward each other in the narrow space between counter and sink, passing dishes back and forth in the gentle rhythm they'd rebuilt over the last 2 months. The engagement hold hadn't been measured in days as much as in behaviors, consistency, correction, follow-through. He dried. She washed. The cat supervised. You know, Jackie said casually, the venue coordinator emailed me again, just checking in. Very professionally non-pressuring. Mark raised an eyebrow. How generous of her. I told her we were recalibrating timelines, Jackie said. She replied with 3 smiley faces, which somehow felt aggressive. Mark smiled faintly and finished drying the last plate. He set the towel down, stepped a half-pace closer to her. Hey, he said. She hummed, focused on rinsing a glass. He slipped the ring onto her finger with deliberate ease. She froze. The water kept running. Mark, she said slowly, eyes dropping to her hand. Are you? I am, he said. She turned off the faucet with a sharp click and stared at her hand as if it might disappear if she blinked too hard. You didn't say anything, she managed. I didn't want a speech, he replied quietly. I wanted alignment. Her eyes lifted to his. Is this for real? He nodded. Re-engaged. Revised terms. She let out a sound that was half laughter, half breathless relief. You're unbelievable. You married me anyway, he pointed out. She stepped into him then. No hesitation, no restraint, and kissed him with the kind of certainty that had once been easy and now was earned all over again. When she pulled back, her forehead resting against his, her voice was soft but steady. Why now? She asked. Because we stopped reacting and started responding, he said. Because your behavior matched your words even when no one was watching. Because I trust the version of us that came out of this more than the one that walked into it. Her throat tightened. I was so afraid you'd see me as a risk forever. I see you as a human who course corrects, Mark said. That's not a risk. That's a partner. She closed her eyes briefly, absorbing it. No redo proposal? She asked, smiling through damp lashes. No candlelight? He shrugged. We already did the big romantic gesture. It was called hard conversations sustained over time. She laughed and swatted his arm. You're impossible. And yet here you are, he said. They didn't post anything online. They didn't call anyone that night. They sat on the couch with takeout containers and rewatched a terrible reality show Jackie loved, the ring occasionally catching the light when she gestured emphatically at the screen. Later, curled together under a blanket, Jackie traced a slow line along Mark's forearm. I used to think commitment meant nothing changing, she said. And now? He asked. And now I think it means choosing each other even when it does, she replied. Especially then. He pressed a kiss to her hair. That's why we work. The wedding stayed a year out. The venue held their date. The guest list grew slowly and deliberately. When people asked about details, Jackie smiled and said, We're enjoying the process, and meant it. They argued sometimes. They recalibrated often. They didn't keep score. One evening months later, sitting on the balcony with iced tea sweating onto the table, Jackie nudged Mark with her foot. When we're 80, she said, do you think we'll remember this? Mark considered the quiet city below them, the way her presence fit so naturally beside his. I think, he said, we'll remember that this is when we learned how to stay. She smiled, toes brushing his. Good, she said. I look excellent in rocking chairs. He laughed. You are offensively prepared for the future. They clinked glasses, not to celebrate survival or triumph, but to honor intention. Theirs hadn't been a perfect love story. It had been better, because it was chosen. Epilogue. What endures at 80. Jackie Wells Jacobs kept a notebook by her chair. Not to remember things, she remembered plenty, but to capture the good ones before they softened into general warmth. Names, dates, small moments that mattered more the farther away they drifted. Mark pretended not to notice the notebook, which was part of their long-standing agreement. He wouldn't tease, and she wouldn't read the entries aloud unless invited. They rocked now on the back porch, the one that overlooked their daughter's garden and their grandson's half-finished treehouse. Somewhere down the yard, there was laughter. The sharp, unfiltered kind that only belonged to children who hadn't yet learned restraint. Listen to that, Jackie said, smiling. Chaos, our favorite legacy. Mark tipped his chair back carefully. I'm still recovering from when chaos lived inside the house. She laughed. You miss it. I miss knowing where everyone was at all times, he said dryly. They watched as their youngest granddaughter ran past with a paper crown sliding sideways on her head. Their son followed, pretending desperation with the theatrical exaggeration of a man who had once sworn he'd never be his parents. Jackie shook her head fondly. Remember when we thought we'd mess them up? We did, Mark said calmly. Just not fatally. She leaned her head against his shoulder. They're good people. They are, he agreed. Because they learned early that love isn't about being right. Jackie smiled at that. That came later in our curriculum. The years had expanded behind them. 2 children who grew into adulthood with personalities wildly their own. 3 grandchildren whose energy made rest optional. And a life punctuated not by perfection but by return. Return to honesty. Return to boundaries. Return to each other. You know what I tell them, Jackie said, nodding toward the yard. When they ask what mattered most, Mark hummed. You always leave out the spreadsheets. She grinned. On purpose. I say, she continued, that love lasts when people are brave enough to be specific. Vague promises fail. Clear ones survive. Mark smiled, a slow, earned smile. You learned that one under protest. I did, she admitted. I hated consequences when I was younger. So did I, he said. Until I realized they were just structure doing its job. They fell quiet again as the sun moved lower, the late afternoon light turning everything forgiving. Their daughter appeared at the back door then, a toddler balanced on her hip. Did you 2 want to eat out here? She called. Jackie waved her off cheerfully. We're fine. Just supervising from a distance. Mark added, very responsibly. Their daughter laughed and disappeared inside. Jackie reached for Mark's hand, her grip softer now but no less intentional. Do you ever think about that year? She asked gently. When things almost went sideways? Sometimes, Mark said. Usually when people talk about easy marriages. She snorted. Ours was never easy. No, he agreed. But it was honest. She nodded, eyes shining with something like gratitude. I learned that loyalty isn't about never being tempted, she said. It's about what you do the moment you notice the temptation. And I learned, Mark added, that trust isn't preserved by pretending nothing could go wrong. It's preserved by addressing things before they do. Jackie smiled. We taught that to our kids. They didn't appreciate it at 15, he said. They appreciate it now. Another shout of laughter echoed from the yard. One of the grandchildren had fallen. Not hurt, just offended. And immediately demanded a ruling from the nearest adult. Jackie watched the scene unfold, her voice soft. We gave them something good, didn't we? Mark squeezed her hand. We gave them evidence. She laughed quietly. You and your evidence. It worked, he said simply. She leaned back in her chair, content. If I had to distill everything we learned, she said thoughtfully, I'd say this: love isn't a feeling you protect, it's a practice you maintain. Mark tilted his glass in a small toast. With check-ins. And boundaries, she added. And faith, he said. Jackie looked at him, amused. I thought you didn't believe in blind faith. I don't, he replied. But I believe in earned trust. They clinked glasses, the sound quiet but certain. Behind them, life continued, loud, imperfect, unmistakably theirs. Ahead of them, time waited. And between the two, they rocked gently, holding not just memories, but the accumulated proof of a life chosen daily and well.